Thank you for joining us for the fourth annual AAKP Policy Summit. Patient voice and patient choice. Kidney patients and patient networks drive inclusion of patient insights, seek care innovation, and demand treatment access. My name is Ed Hickey, and I'm the Vice President of the American Association of Kidney Patients and Chair of the AAKP Veterans Health Initiative. I'm a former Marine and an attorney who has been successfully managing chronic kidney disease over the last few years. As many of you who are watching today know, this is a very complex disease, but with a focus on personal responsibility and the expertise of an outstanding medical team, I've been successfully managing my disease as I pursue my career. I would especially like to extend my gratitude to my dietitian and nutritionist who have been such a tremendous help to me. Today, I'm pleased to introduce the following AKP friends and allies who will present on challenges and innovations to hitting the national radar, barriers to innovation, patient choice, and access to care. Part 1. AAKP has a proud 50-year history of advocating both for innovations in kidney medicine and, just as importantly, timely patient consumer access to treatments. AAKP also believes that all kidney patients should have access to innovative treatments doctors view as the best to maintain optimal patient health and independence. We do not believe patient access to the best kidney treatments should be determined, limited, or denied based on the type of insurance you have, whether this is a private payer, federal employee, VA healthcare, or Medicare. Our next speaker is Reginald Seeto, President and CEO of CareDx, who will speak on improving access to transplant care, telehealth and technology to enable patients along the transplant journey. Reginald, take it away.
As the President and CEO of CareDx, I'm really proud to be able to work with the AAKP and continue to bring interesting topics for patients, physicians, and to how we continue to progress what we do with transplants and the transplant community. Today's talk itself will be on improving access to transplant care with a bit of a focus on telehealth and technology and how that's really enabled patients along the transplant patient journey. And CareDx has been around for more than 20 years. And for those that don't know us, we have a very simple mission, which is basically the leading partner for the transplant ecosystem. So we do all things transplant, whether it's with the patient, whether it's with a center, whether it's with different partners and associations, but really that's all we do 100% of the time. We've been around for more than 2 decades, and that's something that we were quite well known for. In terms of our mission, we're committed to improving the long-term outcomes, and that's really by driving innovative solutions throughout the entire transplant patient journey. As you can see here, this really reflects our focus on the transplant center and what we've been able to do as an organization. We really have a deep presence across multiple different organ spaces, and we first started off in the heart space, where more than 90% of heart transplant centers use our offerings, and more than 1 in 2 patients today have started on a CareDx offering. On the kidney side, which is sort of the focus of today's patient. In less than 3 years, we have more than 70% of centers actively using a CareDx offering, and we have 1 in 3 patients starting in a new transplant on a CareDx offering. And again, we're moving to other organ spaces, including looking at the lung, and that will come later on this year as well. So what is CareDx known for? As you can see on the other slide, we really talked about how we're a leading partner for the ecosystem and the examples with transplant centers. The other area that we're really well known for is bringing innovative solutions. So what you see here is 3 examples of where we were the first in the space. And I think the first one is we're the first to bring gene expression profiling in transplant through AlloMap. We're the first to bring donor-derived cell-free DNA in transplant, which is AlloSure. And we're the first to bring multimodality approach to transplant, known as HeartCare. And so it's important for us to keep on bringing offerings that are not only just meaningful and relevant to patients, but something that continues to drive the space. And throughout our 20 years, we've been known as an innovator, and that's something that we continue to deliver on as well. And so this slide actually depicts a bit of that journey for the transplant patient. And as you can see here, we have multiple touch points, whether you look at pre-transplant, post-transplant, or even peri-transplant. And as you can see here on the pre-transplant side, we're involved in many areas. The first is we have an offering now which connects the transplant centers to the dialysis centers, and that's known as TX Connect. We just introduced that offering this year. We also are actively involved in the waitlist management. So we have more than 7,000 patients of the 90,000 plus who are on a waitlist being managed by CareDx through XenCare. And we also deliver, HLA typing, so the latest type of technology in NGS through hybrid capture, and that's known as LSE-TX70, the first new innovation that's been truly brought to the space. As you move on the post-transplant side here, what you'll see is multiple offerings. We just mentioned AlloSure, which is the donor-derived cell-free DNA, which looks at any form of cell injury, and then also you'll see a combination of different offerings that we're bringing, which are in different stages of research within the organization. We have iBox, which is a validated algorithm, which sort of serves as a prognostic. So one thing that what we believe is adding to clinical utility, so having more than one offering. So you'll see AlloSure combined with the iBox, and we also have combined with a gene expression profiling test, which looks at the immune state of the organ, and that's known as AlloMap. So these offerings today are an active study that we're doing called OKRA. And so with this exciting work, we've also brought in other different offerings to combine with that. So we have a urinary mRNA test called UroMap, which is partnered with the world leader from Cornell, and this Dr. Sutan. We also have AlloID, which is a metagenomic infectious disease test, which looks at 100 different plus pathogens in one tube, and that goes across bacteria, virus, parasite, and fungi. So really, compelling way to continue to differentiate the space. And the third is HistoMap, which is a gene expression test used with tissue samples. So as you can see here, driving innovation is core of what we do. As you move forwards, we also play a role in electronic medical records for the centers, improving that workflow, as well as things such as quality management systems, and obviously continuing with further clinical studies with multiple centers. And as you look at what we do as a company, we just gave the examples of supporting the patient transplant center. We have an entire team which is dedicated around each of these transplant centers. So we have an account manager, we have a medical science liaison, we obviously have a mobile offering called RemoTrack, which you'll hear about during the course of this presentation. And then also we have other areas which are particularly our patient care management team, which is sort of front and foremost of how we continue to support patients throughout their journey as well. So we have someone that is personalized and contacting each of these patients as they look at their different schedules. And so we now get to the base of the discussion today. So we look at advances in telehealth and advances in this remote space. And really during the course of last year, and I think the word unprecedented has been used many times, but I think without doubt every single person has been somewhat impacted by COVID, and it really has transformed the way that we've had to look at what we do, but also every single business I think in the world has had to reassess that. And I think for us, a couple of things were really important for us. The need for remote offerings and services for patients were really important, particularly during that peak of COVID, where there really wasn't a way to necessarily get into the transplant center, or there wasn't a way necessarily to get labs done, and it really was just a time which I think was very scary. And how do we keep patients safe was front and foremost, and sort of our sort of thinking. So as we went along that journey, these are just some of the examples of how we evolved as an organization and how we developed some of the different offerings. So I'll mention three of these just on this slide. But during the start of COVID, in March 17th, we actually announced the start of RemoTrack, which is remote mobile phlebotomy. Today we have more than 150 centers that use this, more than 7,000 patients that have registered. And this is a service where I think essentially addressed some of the concerns we'd heard about safety and the ability to have some of these tests done at home, and also access issues during the peak of COVID. I think this is something that was, 9 out of 10 patients say this is something they still appreciate and they still want to have, and most of the transplant centers also say the same thing. As we look at during the course of COVID, we developed in our digital offerings. So what you hear is in September, we announced AlloCare, which is our transplant-specific app, which I'll touch upon as well during this presentation. And that was a way to digitally connect with patients and also provide them with different forms of communication and also information to be shared as well as part of that direct dialogue. And then, lastly, at the start of this year, another example we brought was really this connecting the dialysis patient to the transplant center. And this is the TX Connect offering, which is offered through the centers as well. And so I'll go through, these three examples. RemoTrack really was, an incredible sort of offering that was put together in less than a week, and that's because there was so much of demand. How do we help out during this time of COVID? And what we did here was we're able to work with the centers. There are about 200 plus in the United States, transplant centers, and more than 150 have interest. And so we knew there was strong demand to how do we support during this time. They'd actively reached out as well as patients. And then how do we continue to sort of build upon this? We needed to have more of these patient care managers who could help schedule and support these patients. So that we ended up hiring 40 what we call patient care managers in a period of less than a month. And then we had to create this mobile phlebotomy network, something which we didn't have existing at the time of COVID. So what you reflect upon here is, as a company, we felt there was, and we understood there was a need for remote offerings, and this is something that I think is seen as one of the most impactful things we've done as a company, because patients didn't have a way of accessing blood draws, and centers didn't have a way of getting back results. And this is not just something that was done with kidney patients, but it was obviously in heart patients, lung patients. I do mention that because part of the testings post-transplant include, in the lung side, what's called invasive bronchoscopy, or on the heart side, some biopsies, and these weren't able to be done during the peak of COVID. So having the ability to have diagnostic biomarkers which could add to clinical utility and support their management patients is absolutely critical. And obviously we take that often for granted on the kidney side, being a much larger patient pool where we see different levels of innovation we've brought, but clearly on the heart and lung side, this is also something that was really important as well. And so as we move on to this digital app, which we launched at the end of September last year, and this is really an important app because it was developed by transplant patients, transplant centers. It wasn't something that we took off the shelf, and it was really something that was built from scratch, and one where all the usability and app features were meant to be relevant for the patients and the centers. And I think what's important is also to have refreshed and important content. So that's something that we felt was important as we developed the app. And also ensuring that there was a way of communication among the communities. There's an active chat board that can be used as well. In terms of the app features, medication management is often so critical, particularly with compliance. And so that's an area that, as a remote offering, we thought was important to provide these reminders as part of that with the app. And also just different health metrics monitoring. So there's direct connection with different physiological parameters, which the patient could track as part of that, which we felt was an important way for them to see how they were they could monitor themselves as part of this process. And then really just the whole ordering workflow, they could have the option of calling up a patient care manager or doing it directly through the app itself. So really features that were meant to be beneficial and functional for the patient. And in terms of usability, the ability now to track this medication adherence, how often they take the medications, but also just the different health tracking tools. We received excellent feedback on that, and they set their own goals, and there's ability to check in on those and how they're performing as well. At the end of the day, it's a customizable interface, and so if we think of where we're evolving, with patients being more remote, then having a way to digitally connect is so important, and that's why AlloCare has become the standard as we look at how we look at transplant specific apps, particularly because it was designed again by transplant patients and also transplant centers, and it wasn't an off-the-shelf solution. It was a very tailored, specific solution for the transplant community. And so the third offering we'd mentioned, and this is something that came this year, is we know with the kidney initiative, there are many different areas that are going to change as a course of that. So how do we increase the number of organ transplants, for example, or how do we increase donation and transplantation rates? And so dialysis centers will now be moving more patients across in the referral waitlist process. And I think as part of that, we felt we had a role in how do we help that patient journey. And so we have TX Connect, which is really a cloud-based solution. It's very seamless. It links directly with the EMR, so it allows the electronic data records to be done in a fairly seamless way, and information to be captured and to be sent across to the transplant center. And we see this as a referral management tool that we have. Now, in terms of, if you look at the referring source, it's great for them because it basically provides dialysis center or the nephrology practice with a single dashboard. It shows the patient status, when's the next appointment, and some of these things you take for granted, but a lot of this is still done by paper. So having an electronic way of doing this is actually important as you connect the different dots. And we feel like we have a role to play there, connecting all the different dots and pieces. Also allows for that bi-directional way of communication and messaging, which I think is also important, that can be done real time as well. If you look at transplant center, I think for them it really, with the number of patients coming through, and that will increase during the course of this year and each year forth, as we look at this increase in referral rates and ultimately waitlist management, then it streamlines that process for them. They get to control the structure and the process and what that looks like as well, and it's done in a very systematic and structured way, and then it allows them also this two-way messaging with the referral source. At the end of the day, it has the potential to actually reduce the time from referral to listing, which I think is absolutely important as we think of this, this patient journey. The more we can do to help out is just so critical. So, as you see today, with this whole world to moving to more remote-based or digital solutions, I think there are three specific examples here. Remote track was a way of dealing with a remote patient. Allocare was a way of saying, how do we connect up that patient, whether with the community and also with the transplant center, but also with our patient care managers. And I think what you see here with TX Connect is a way that we're anticipating part of the future and how we can continue to help out in this space. Use this as sort of the final slide. What it does show is really a patient journey, and it is a long one, right? It is a long journey, whether you have end-stage renal disease, then going to dialysis, and then going all the way to referral, and then eventually onto getting onto the wait list itself, and then having to go through the different stages, waiting for an organ, and then actually going for the transplant itself, and then obviously the post-transplant monitoring. And I think it's a longitudinal process and many different stages. What I want to echo from this slide itself is that CareDx will be with you at every stage, and so we've developed offerings and services that will be part of that journey, and this is the example of that. And obviously we have more offerings that will come as part of this, but I do think as a company that's been dedicated for transplant for more than 20 years, as a company that's 100% focused on transplant, and the company that spends more than $60 million a year on R&D, all towards transplant. Every single R&D dollar goes towards how do we continue to improve that patient journey. That's our singular focus. We have many people at our company that have a direct and personal connection. Our head of clinical ops is a KP patient. Our head of sales, his daughter's a heart transplant recipient. One of our account managers in Florida, her daughter is a kidney transplant recipient. So for all of us, this is something that's really important for us. We know the struggles that you go through. It's not easy. It's not an easy journey at all, and that's why we think it's so important for us to connect that patient journey. And we have an absolute role as a company to support you and to continue to bring meaningful offerings. So I really want to thank the AAKP for this wonderful opportunity. I mean, we love the way that we can continue to engage with associations, we continue to engage with patients, and that hopefully we can contribute to make a difference in what you do in your life every day, because it's not an easy journey as a transplant patient. So thank you again for the privilege and honor on behalf of CareDx to speak to you all today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reginald, for those wonderful remarks.